Okay, so y'all have been playing with Soundtrap, and I have been getting emails left and right, and it's super cool. I dig it. Um, but I do need to figure out how to turn off email notifications every time you save your project. I want to do so much. I'm trying to chunk it up into bits that are digestible. So we played with the loop browser, and I just threw a loop on here to kind of catch up to where we were. And it's a very, very simple thing. It actually has bass and drums. Now, one would call it, say, 808 on it. An 808 is kind of a middle ground of a drum and a bass, but it's in G minor, so it carries pitch. That will be a separate video. All right, so I just want to go over a couple more things on the interface. So we talked about saving and creating a new project. And if you want, when you are done with something, you can come down here to export and export your project as an MP3 or as a WAV file. A WAV file is a much larger file as far as its usually its sample rate and its bit depth. And I'm not going to get too much into that because you can't change much in this program. But an MP3, that's kind of what so many people are used to hearing, and they're small enough that you can email them, things like that. So if you ever want to have a complete project, and we will do that, but we're not getting into that right now. There are the edit controls. So again, if you want to split a region, you kind of need to highlight it and place your cursor. Then split region becomes available, and it just cut it at a random place. I just hit Command Z to undo. You can also redo the split. If you do cut something, or if you have multiple pieces of something, you have to highlight it in order to cut it. You can also highlight both of them, and you always hold down Shift. If you click on one thing, hold down Shift to pick up another thing in that selection, and you can hit I guess you can't. You can hit merge regions with MIDI data, but basically that would put it together. Settings, MIDI settings. So I do have a MIDI keyboard connected right now. So you can see that it is called an Oxygen 8. It's an O2 USB MIDI connected keyboard. There's a tuner, although you need the microphone. And if you need to, tune a guitar or something, you could use the tuner. I'd recommend using one that you have already. Merging tracks is kind of when you have multiple tracks, maybe like that 808 and a drum beat, but we aren't doing that yet. Sound quality high, I think I talked about that before. There's loads of tutorials, so if you don't want to wait for me to come up with something and you want to investigate, please do. Let me know if you learn anything. What does this do? Undo add region, redo split region. Oh, so this is basically the undo commands that they kind of just have embedded there. Oh, and a save button. That's nice. I hadn't even thought of that. What is this thing? Previous versions. Oh, that's interesting. It's not available because there isn't a previous version. No mix available for download. Okay, I understand that. I haven't named my song. If I want to, I click on it. I'm going to call this demo. I usually call things tests that I feel I can delete, and I'll call this demo. Again, I think I've mentioned this, but you can share your project, add emails here for people you want to collaborate with. Don't upgrade. I'm dealing with that, and exiting the studio takes you to your profile page. Snap to grid. I don't think I talked about this, and that is a really, really cool thing to know. So snap to grid is a function that exists in every program. And I'm zooming in because I want you to see, and I would not have to keep scrolling back if I had my cursor placed at the end of this clip. So now when I zoom in, I actually zoom in where I am, where I want to be. Okay, so the grid are these lines, eh? So if I were to click and drag on this clip, I can only move to the nearest grid value, which in this instance are 16th notes. If I undo snap to grid, I could grab this thing and move it anywhere I want in between. And that is really useful if you're recording, say, a guitar part or a vocal, and it's just a little bit off and you want to move a note. Generally, for what we're doing, and if you're really a beginner like I am, I would stay in snap to grid until I needed something different. Okay, so I tend to say over the years, even in Pro Tools, you want to make music when you're starting off in grid mode or in snap to mode. And then as you start to play more or add different types of instruments, or you want to humanize, then you start to kind of play around outside of the snap to. We have some settings here. Again, grid size, which is 16ths, the time signature of the song, which is 4/4, and our ruler is beats in music instead of time. And again, I think that's the only difference between the podcast template and the music template is if I change the ruler, now this top ruler is time instead of music. But we're making music, so we want to keep it as a musical reference ruler. We've already talked about this button. That's our loop browser. We have another collaboration button so that you can invite people to collaborate. I don't know if there's any difference between share and invite collaborator, but what I do know is within this window, you can send messages to each other, either written, or you can even get on a call, a video chat, and talk to each other. Last button kind of up in this area is what they call the cycle button, which basically means, or cycle mode, that this purple line here represents, at least in this indication, an 8-measure phrase. You could call it a loop because it came from the loop browser and it's cut perfectly. It will play over and over again. So if I hit return with cycle mode on, kind of a cool beat. Okay, but just notice that when it gets to the when it gets up to the 9th measure, boom, starts over. If I take off cycle mode, and I'm just going to fast forward here a little bit, it's going to keep going. So the idea with that, when would you use cycle mode versus not? So a lot of popular music, so many of you let me know, like I'm into rap, I'm into hip hop, and even rock music and pop music, it is based on repetition. Not repetition in the sense of boring, some might think so, but repetition in terms of motifs. That word motif means a recurring theme, something that comes up and kind of repeats, and we like it. Musically, we like it. It's just how music is driven. So if we're working on, say, an 8-measure phrase, and we know that, after 8 measures, we're probably going to repeat that part over and over again, then we'd work in cycle mode. But then as we start to take the song and say, you know what, we have some parts, let's duplicate them and make an actual arrangement that is a song that's 3 minutes long or whatever. I should be in snap. So that's an example where snap mode is the way to be. I was not in snap, so my pieces here, my sections aren't quite right. Now they are. I hope. So right now, if I'm in cycle mode, it's just going to repeat this first 8 measures instead of the 24 measures that I have now laid out. So if I kill cycle mode, then it'll just play throughout. Okay. And then this piece you can actually move. So if you want to work on, hey, I'm going to build a drop or some transition with different kind of elements, maybe a drum fill here or there. You can change what section gets cycled. And you can also, just coming over to one side or the other, you can shorten the cycle or you can lengthen the cycle. So cycle mode, super cool. It's going to be useful. I can already tell. All right, so we've kind of gone over just about everything over here. We have zoom tools over here. So down on the bottom, you can zoom in, you can zoom out. One thing I noticed when I was starting to play with Soundtrap is that these waveforms look useless when you're zoomed out. They're kind of janky. Like you could not edit here at this level of zoom. But as you start to zoom in, that's a real waveform. You can actually get to see little clicks. These are probably hi-hats and things like that. So when it's time to start editing things, you want to zoom in pretty closely. So just to let you know about that. Okay, so down on the bottom here, we have some more settings. This is all settings related to the click. So I'm going to mute this track right now. And I'm going to turn on the metronome. And the musicians who practice know what a metronome is. Here's a metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Again, that I think I talked about this in the last video about drums. That accented or slightly higher pitched beep is the downbeat of the count. So you can change the sound. Right now it is a clave. You can make it a click, which literally sounds like I'm hitting my couch. No, let's not do that. In fact, I didn't mean to make a new track. We can make it a hi-hat. And it's really important when you're going to start playing, like if you plug in a piano and you're going to play and record it, you have to know what tempo you're playing. You have to have that reference, or else you're just kind of playing to a tempo in your mind. And when you start to want to use the grid, it won't make any sense. So if you're gonna play an instrument, a guitar or a piano type instrument that's digital, you really have to have a metronome. The count-in is when you're going to actually record something. It will give you, in this instance, 2 measures or 8 quarter note beats before it starts to record. So, for example, I will add a new instrument track, and it's a piano. I'm actually playing it on my MIDI keyboard. The response is pretty good, for online. I didn't think, it feels great. So if I hit, right now this R indicates that I'm going to record on this track. If I had multiple tracks, I would need to essentially arm one of them in order to hear it. If I make another track and make it a bass sound, it's a guitar. If I change and turn on record enable on my piano, it's actually both of them. That's a little weird. No, I want the piano. Oh, highlight. Okay, so select the track. That's different than Pro Tools in my experience. So if I hit this R, it's telling the program I want to record on that track, as well as highlighting the actual track. Then I come down to this record. This is called the transport. You have your fast forward, your play, your rewind, your stop, and your record. So if I hit record, what I'm expecting is that it's going to give me 8 counts, 8 quarter note counts on the metronome before it starts to roll, before it starts to record. That way you can get ready, you can put your hands where you need them to be. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there are my chords that I just recorded. So not very fancy chords. I don't really play the piano, but it helps explain. So this G minor, that comes from the loop. I did not play in G minor at all. 134 is the actual tempo. So the tempo was just figured out from the loop. If, let's see, here, this is going to be a test in real time. If I slow down, would you like to adjust your audio data to match the new tempo? This could take some time. Okay, I don't want to take the time on video, but the idea is, even though this is recorded, they're claiming that they could slow it down. But it's going to take some time because, yeah, you're asking it to slow it down, but most likely maintain the pitch so that it's still in G minor, the bass still plays the same notes and things like that. So I'm just going to hit cancel there. But that's pretty cool. Like, you can change tempo even with the audio. That's a very advanced feature. I haven't tested it. I don't know how well it works. Those of you who know what I'm talking about are kind of, oh, okay, that is actually pretty rich. But the tempo here is 134 BPM. That is most likely kind of a double time feel, but we won't get into that now. It displays the key signature, which is based right now, at least on the loop that I loaded up. I talked about the transport. Here, this is telling me time. So it is telling me that when I get to the 17th measure, I'm 28 seconds into a song. And then we have a master volume. So this is just going to bring up or down the whole song in balance. It's kind of like hitting the volume on your computer. Typically, in a professional program, we'd call that the master bus or the master fader in Pro Tools. And it means that it also is kind of the sum of all of the sounds put together. It's not that relevant for this program, but it is something that as we transition, and hope that we do transition, we would be talking about that a lot. All right, so then on each track, what do we have here? We have the record enable button. Again, I want to record on this track. This type of track, this is an audio track, and just because it's a loop doesn't mean that I couldn't plug in my microphone and record. Now, I do have a microphone plugged in, but it's not, I don't think it's routed to this right now, and I'm not going to test that. You have volume, so of each track. And when we talk about mixing, one of the very first things we're talking about is balancing the volumes of each of our tracks. Some of you did some really cool things with loops. But if you have 5, 6, 10 tracks of loops that are just playing and taking up this whole space, some of them are going to be too loud, some of them are too quiet, and you need to balance that. So you have your little volume knob for each. This button stands for solo, which means I want to turn off every other sound that I have. So if I listen to my piano, no, I just want to hear the loop, or I just want to hear the piano. You can mute, all right? So I don't want to hear this track. Usually solo is used when you want to focus in on something, not when you want to hear everything. So don't solo everything. If you want to turn stuff off, mute them. That's more important in other programs too. And finally, there's an automation lane here. And what automation is at least in this program, it's 3 things. You click on this button and it allows you to then add an automation. You can add automated panning. So as soon as you see this line, it represents the middle of your headphones or your speakers. And I do recommend that you do this all on headphones. If I click and drag, I have just dragged this whole thing to the left, the right. That's so weird. In Pro Tools, that's the left. So I can automate it, which means as I'm doing this, the sound is going to move back and forth. Let's not listen to those horrible chords. Not something I would normally do with drums and bass, but if I had a cool little synth sound or a lead or a flute even, or anything really that you want to move around, that would be kind of fun. You can also turn it off. So I am going to delete my panning automation. Panning is usually something you'd also have up here on most programs. But if you want to move something to the left or the right or keep it there, you just have to bring the automation lane and move it. And that is going to be useful because usually we don't leave everything in the center. If you have a guitar, you might pan it off to the left. If you have a piano, you might pan it off to the right and balance with that guitar, because normally what's in the center is a vocal, snare drum, kick drum, bass. I kind of start there. Other automations, volume. So if you want to, I'm going to delete that again. Volume would be, let's start quiet and, let's have this thing get up to full volume at around the 5th measure. Okay, so that's called a fade. It's fading in volume-wise. And often we will automate very detailed, around things that we want to be, to make quieter if there's something that we need to hear better on another track. We'll get into that later. The other automation that they have is sweeps, because they know their audience. We love filter sweeps. So this is a filter sweep that's essentially an EQ that's moving. So they call that muffled. You can make it hollow. Okay, that's interesting. That's called a high pass filter. So it's going from low end and cutting all those lows and just passing the high frequencies through. Not going to get into that. Nasal, I don't know what that is. It's actually almost the same thing, nasal, except that it's kind of focuses on the mid-range, those of you that know anything about equalization. Okay, so, it's cool. I think it's cool. Let's see, how would we bring it back, though? Let's say, can you bring it? You can't bring it back at the same time. So let's say we go there. Okay, I have to figure out how to bring it back to normal. All right, so that's automation. That's like pretty much a lot of what you can do. Now, I'm going to stop this video. I think that's pretty good.